The Galactic Academy orbited a dying star, a monument to the collective's thousand-year dominion over the lesser species. Within its crystalline halls, young beings from 100 worlds learned their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Humans were a recent addition, barely 3 generations since first contact, and the newest students to occupy the lowest tier. Grace Martinez sat in the back of the xenobiology lecture hall, her datapad displaying notes she'd already memorized twice over. Around her, alien students of various morphologies whispered and gestured, their conversations a cacophony of clicks, hums, and whistles that the translation implants struggled to process. She kept her head down, a survival strategy she'd perfected over 2 semesters. Commander Vector, a towering Krillian with 4 eyes and exoskeleton plating that gleamed like polished obsidian, paced before the assembled class. His species had conquered 17 star systems before humanity had invented the wheel. He wore his superiority like a second skin. Humans, he announced, his voice a resonant bass that vibrated through the floor panels, are biologically primitive. Their homeworld's gravity is laughably weak. Their lifespans are brief. Their senses are dull. He gestured toward the human section with one of his 4 arms. They are here only because the collective requires diversity. The snickers from the other students echoed through the chamber. Grace's jaw tightened, but she remained still. Ezra Chen, sitting 2 rows ahead, turned to glance back at her. His expression was carefully neutral, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. Commander Vector approached the human section, his footsteps heavy with intention. You understand, don't you, that you are the weakest species ever admitted to this institution? Your acceptance was charitable. Grace looked up, meeting his 4 eyes with her 2. With respect, Commander, we scored highest in the theoretical physics placement exams. The silence that followed was absolute. Vector's mandibles clicked, a Krillian expression of displeasure. Theoretical work requires no strength, no endurance. You hide behind mathematics because your bodies are fragile. Mathematics, Grace replied evenly, is what gets species to the stars. Physical strength is what keeps them crawling in the dirt. The other students gasped, some in their native languages, some in standard galactic. No one spoke to Commander Vector this way. No one dared. The Krillian's primary arms flexed, and before anyone could react, he struck Grace across the face with the back of his chitinous hand. The impact sent her sprawling from her seat, her datapad clattering across the floor. Blood trickled from her split lip. 10 seconds. That's how long it took for the universe to change. Ezra was out of his seat, but Grace raised one hand, stopping him mid-stride. She pushed herself up slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving the commander. When she stood, she didn't touch her bleeding mouth. She didn't flinch. Gravity, she said quietly, her voice carrying through the deadly silent hall. On Earth is 9.8 meters per second squared. The Krillian homeworld, 7.1. We are the weakest species here. She took a step forward. Every day we walk, we carry weights your species can't comprehend. Every movement we make is against resistance you've never felt. Commander Vector's mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. Empty words from Grace moved. Human reflexes, forged in Earth's heavier gravity, trained in the evolutionary crucible of predator and prey. Her fist connected with Vector's thorax joint, a vulnerability in Krillian anatomy that any xenobiology student would know, but which no one had ever dared exploit. The commander staggered. Not from the force alone, but from the shock. A human had struck him. A human had made him move. We are fragile, Grace continued, her voice still calm. But we are not weak. We break bones and continue fighting. We lose limbs and adapt. We face extinction and innovate our way out of it. Your species conquered 17 systems with superior strength. Mine conquered our own world with inferior everything, and we did it anyway. Security alarms began to wail. The other students pressed themselves against the walls, uncertain whether to flee or watch history unfold. Ezra appeared at Grace's side, along with the 3 other humans in the class. They formed a line, not threatening but unmistakably united. Commander Vector straightened, his exoskeleton plates shifting as he assessed the situation. For the first time in his centuries of life, uncertainty flickered across his alien features. These weren't the subservient primitives he'd expected. These were humans. You've assaulted a student, Grace said softly. in front of witnesses from 40 different species. The collective's own laws are clear about that, regardless of hierarchy. The commander's communication implant was already flashing. The dean's office, the collective council, perhaps even the human ambassador, all receiving automatic alerts. The vast machinery of bureaucracy and law, the very foundations the collective had built to maintain order, now turned its attention to this moment. Vector looked at Grace, really looked at her, and perhaps for the first time saw not a primitive specimen, but a representative of something he hadn't anticipated, a species that had climbed from Earth's gravity well not despite their weaknesses, but because of what those weaknesses had taught them. "Class dismissed," he said finally, his voice hollow. As the students filed out in stunned silence, Ezra handed Grace a cloth for her lip. "You know this is going to change everything," he murmured. Grace nodded, watching Commander Vector stand alone in the empty lecture hall, a monument to an old order that had just begun to crumble. "That's exactly what we're here for," she replied. The Galactic Academy had taught thousands of species their place in the cosmos, but it had never encountered humanity before, a species that refused to accept the place assigned to them, that transformed every disadvantage into innovation, every weakness into strength. 10 seconds after Commander Vector hit the wrong girl, the silence that followed wasn't submission. It was the sound of the galaxy beginning to understand what human really meant. The end.